Good evening and welcome to the 50th New York Film Festival. My name is Eugene Hernandez from the Film Society of Lincoln Center, and welcome to the festival. Welcome to the Eleanor Bunin Monroe Film Center. Thrilled to be hosting evening discussions here at the theater every night with a number of terrific partners. We're thrilled to be working with New York Women in Film and Television. I want to thank Terry and everybody at NYWFT for all their help and for our panelists for putting this evening together. To tell you more about NYWFT and tonight's event, I'd like to introduce from NYWFT, producer Alexis Alexanian.
Thank you, Eugene, and thank you to the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center Film Society. NYWFT is an organization, a professional association for women in film, television, digital media. We are about 2,000 members strong and growing. We are thrilled to do programs like this tonight with New York Film Festival. Sorry, I keep flubbing that. We're also very excited to talk a little bit about the New York State post-production tax incentive, and all of our panelists have worked very hard to make sure that that was, what is the word? Not ratified. What is the word? Passed.
Signed into law by Governor Cuomo.
Signed into law by Governor Cuomo. NYWFT does a lot of programs, 50 or more programs a year. We aim to educate and edify and provide relevant information to our members and to the New York community in general. So we encourage you to look at our website, nywft.org, and find out a little bit more about us, and come to some of our special events. In December, we have the annual Muse Awards, where we celebrate women's work, both from in front of the camera and behind the camera. It's a fantastic event and an inspirational day, so check that out. I'd like to announce our moderator tonight is Richard Guay. He is a veteran of the film industry, a film producer, and the vice president of sales and marketing at Entertainment Partners, which is one of the wonderful sponsors of NYWFT, but also one of the most prominent payroll services and provider of lots of other sales and resource opportunities for filmmakers. So without further ado, Rich.
Well, thank you. Welcome. We are going to talk about the credit in a moment, but I want to just introduce the panelists for tonight, and I'm going to actually read because I want to get everyone's title correct. We have Pat Kaufman, who is the Executive Director of New York State's Governor's Office of Film and Television.
Motion Picture and Television Development.
There you go. It's wrong. So much for reading. And then we've got Alex Halpern, who's the CEO and co-founder of Post Factory here in New York. And then we have Yana Collins Lehman, Managing Director of Trevanna Post. So I'm going to start out by pointing out that the post-only tax incentive, there are a lot of tax incentives. There are tax incentives all over the world. I believe 42 states now have some form of tax incentive for motion pictures and television. This incentive is unique among them. I believe it's the only one like it that is post-production only. And so what I'm going to start out, before we get to the details of what it is and how you qualify, I want to ask, well, I guess both Alex and Yana to give us a little rundown on the history. What, how did this start? Where did this idea come from to do a post-only credit? Oh.
Okay, sure. Well, in December 2009, a group of us who own and operate post-production facilities got together and became an alliance, and we called ourselves the Post New York Alliance because New York Post was already taken by some newspaper. And we paid dues. There's 14 of us, including the union, Local 700 Editors Guild, and we paid dues and hired a lobbyist specifically to lobby for this post-only incentive. So all of us in our industry benefited enormously from the larger production incentive that was passed several years prior to 2009. but we realized that those of us in post realized that we were not grabbing as many of the jobs as we could, because there's a lot of reasons why, a film wouldn't shoot in New York, like if you're True Grit and you need the desert of New Mexico, but we wanted to incentivize them to come and finish in New York. And so that was the point of this specific legislation, the post-only legislation. And we really did not know what we were doing at all, but we knocked it out of the park and passed it our first try. It passed. It was the only legislative ad that year, 2010, and it was passed as a 10% credit, which we quickly realized was not a significant enough credit to get people to relocate to New York to finish their films. And so then we've spent the last 2+ years lobbying for this technical amendment to that credit. And the Governor Cuomo recently signed into law the tripling of the credit, so it's now 30% and 35% if you finish your film upstate.
Okay. I think one thing that we should add, Yana, is that at that time that we first all got together was the first time really that the stakeholders, small and large, in the post-production community kind of got together and said, hey, we have to do something as a community here. And like the editors had the union, 3,000 members. It was the first time like different facilities and different business owners got together and said, okay, we all compete, but if we're going to try and make the pie, enlarge the pie and stabilize the pie and show to the rest of the world that New York is a place to come and finish your movies, make your movies, and do it from one end to the other, that you don't just come here and shoot movies, which has traditionally been the history of New York, shooting your television shows here and shooting your movies here, that we're going to have to get more proactive about it. And this is the first piece of that. I think it's the Post-Production Alliance, all of us on the Alliance feel that it's, laying the foundation for a larger post-production community, and that's very important because the paradigm with technology isn't changing. Post-production now is really part of pre-production. And everybody here that's been shooting digitally knows, you can't just decide after the fact what your workflow is going to be, especially with new cameras and everything. So, we were saying last year at Sundance, it's really pre-production, capture, delivery. And so the Post-Production Alliance and this kind of communication amongst the stakeholders is important for everybody to be able to make an effective product to capture a wider audience and continue to make great films. You want to add to it, Pat?
Pat, do you want to tell us tell us a little bit about the credit specifically?
Sure, absolutely, because it's really exciting that Governor Cuomo has so embraced this industry of production and post-production, and has really made it his own. And it's absolutely committed to expanding production industry, expanding the post-production industry, because this is a way to create more jobs and all of the economic activity that this sort of wonderful work generates. We all know that most major TV shows and movies choose where to go based on whether or not they can get an incentive. That really drives this industry. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, I'm sure. So the fact that we have such robust programs, and now the new post-production credit is really robust now, is tremendously exciting. And to put it in a slightly larger context, the bigger production program, the bigger production credit actually started in 2004. And it gives a 30% credit for if you make your movie here and use a sound stage and do all your work here, including your and if you do your post-production work, you can be a part of that. And that program, since 2004, has already had 744 productions go through it. And those 744 productions either already have or will generate $11.6 billion in economic activity. Billion, not M million. We calculate that it's been over 500,000 jobs, or hires. Over 500,000 people got hired to work on these various productions. So that demonstrates how important this is in terms of creating jobs, and that's what the governor's commitment is. So it's kind of from 35,000 feet. The New York State production credit will give 30 to 35% to any production that is not already in the bigger program. For the most part, that's going to be productions that have filmed somewhere outside of New York. but choose to come, as already has been said, but choose to come and do their post-production in New York. And as long as they do 75% of what is considered their qualified post-production in New York, then they can qualify to get either 30 or 35% for the work done. And the line of demarcation as to whether or not you would get 30% for work that you've done at a post-production facility versus 35 is just where is that facility or where is that post-production expert located. If it's in Nassau, Suffolk, or New York City, or Rockland, Westchester, Orange, Putnam, or Dutchess, if it's in those areas, you get 30%. If it's beyond those areas, up north or west, then you can get 35%. The kinds of productions that are eligible to get the credit, as is the same for the bigger credit, the kinds of productions that are eligible are narrative feature films, episodic narrative television series, the television pilots and presentations that can lead to the narrative episodic TV, or television movies and miniseries. So those kinds of productions. So you could go make your show in Louisiana, and you could apply and do your post-production in New York, and you can get it. The application can be found on our website. If you haven't already been there, as soon as this is over, you must rush to your iPhone and go to nylovesfilm.com. nyloves with an S, film.com, and then go to the section on incentives, and the whole application is laid out for you, and as well as a very useful piece of information, Schedule B, that sort of tells you what qualifies and what doesn't.
Okay. And when do I rush? If I have a movie, when do I rush? When do I make the application?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked, Rich. You do have to apply for the you do have to apply to get into the program while your production is still filming, while they're still in principal photography. So if you've already wrapped and finished your principal photography, it's too late. So you must apply while you're still in principal photography.
I believe it's the last day of principal photography. You have to have your application in by the last day of principal photography.
I mean, we give you as much time as we can to get it in, and if you do, then you can be in the program.
And just in terms of what types of expenses qualify, just music?
You know,
Yes.
Composer does qualify. Rights never qualify. So rights. So if you're paying rights,
Right.
music
Licensing
rights,
music does not
licensing
qualify.
that does not qualify.
Okay.
You know, and if you're using like store-bought images or whatever,
Stock footage.
Stock footage.
that's not going to qualify.
Right. Okay.
And what will qualify is what you're doing in New York. So
Okay.
if you have a post person going down to New Orleans, and like Alex sent one of his team down to New Orleans to work on the production while it's filming,
Right.
whatever work that
doesn't qualify.
that doesn't
That's
qualify.
important,
It's
isn't it?
only when they come back to New York and they're working in New York.
Now, if somebody, that's a very important question. If somebody, let's say like a show like Treme is shooting down in New Orleans, and they have somebody going down there to do offset or near set dailies, does that, and then it's coming back to be processed at the mothership in New York, that person and that equipment does not qualify.
That does
right?
not qualify.
But
the person and the
process
equipment,
in New York qualifies.
that qualifies. The person and the
Right.
equipment have to be sitting in a chair in New York,
So
or
the same-
standing at a desk in New York.
So,
Right.
so if a production comes, but if the same production comes to New York with equipment that they got from a vendor in New Orleans, let's say they're bringing equipment and that's part of their post workflow, and they're sending money back to New Orleans to that rental house, does that equipment qualify?
Yes, because we have something called sales and use. That's the basis of how all of our
Okay.
incentives work. It's called sales and use. So it's where the work is done that is the demarcation, not
Not where the money goes
not,
to.
Yeah, it's where the work is done. And the great thing is that New York has so much. I mean, our infrastructure is stronger than just about any other infrastructure anywhere, and you can get all the equipment here, and you can get that more, I can't put a percentage to it, but just about all the time.
Well, maybe we can ask that question of
That's
these
here.
guys. What can't you do in New York?
There's nothing you can't
We
do.
haven't come up with anything.
There's nothing you can't do in New York. If
Alex
you
is a
guys
New
can
Yorker.
figure it out, let us know.
Yeah.
If we
From a
can't do it right now,
post-production
we'll be able to do
standpoint.
it by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really true, and as an alliance, one great thing about being an alliance is that we really have been able to successfully inventory what we have, and we're in the process of getting that organized and really being able to present that to productions that are shooting outside of New York, to have it in a very concise manner. Like, here's the size of our sound, mixed stages, and here's the size of our VFX labs, and here's the size of our cutting rooms, and so that's one reason why.
Are you finding that people, even, I know it's a little early because the incentive has just been increased recently, but are you finding those places outside what you call the Metropolitan Commuter Tax District, that 35%, are facilities happening up there? I mean, if I go to Rochester, am I
You
going to
should answer
find...
that, yeah.
Yana just
I would
Yana
be
answer
very
that.
happy to speak
She
to
knows
this.
every facility up there.
One of the mandates of the governors and of the states is to create more jobs, and specifically upstate. And there is kind of an interesting political divide that I discovered in some of my lobbying efforts, where it is a perception that this is a very large credit and that much of it is benefiting downstate, specifically Manhattan, and upstate is giant, and they've had a rough go of it, and also as an alliance we're extremely interested in starting to collaborate. There's a ton of professionals up there, a ton of artists up there, a ton of great facilities up there, and it's just a matter of discovering them. I mean, I just went on a trip to Albany, New Paltz, and Kingston, and just in 2 days met people with like gorgeous facilities. First of all, they have a ton of space, like giant hallways, like gorgeously lit edit suites. It's a totally different culture. But many of them were professionals who lived in New York and wanted to get out. So they're not really.
And it keeps going. I mean,
And it goes further. Oh yeah, absolutely. There's
go to
tons of places in
Rochester
Rochester, tons of places in Buffalo, and that's one of the other things the Alliance is very, very committed to, is finding them, helping them find each other, and really bringing them to the surface so that producers can find them too. Because I know 35% is a big number. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge number. It puts us in. It makes us competitive with Canada, with the UK, with anywhere else that someone is going to go consider post because of their very aggressive credits and labor credits. And so we're very committed to finding these facilities that absolutely do exist, and to working with them and to help them. Like the point I was making is that they haven't necessarily wanted to be found. That's kind of why you get out of here and like move up there, is because you want to. But to introduce them to the existence of this credit has been a big mission of ours, and so we have a lot of plans towards finding them. But a quick answer to your question is yes. It exists.
There's some great facilities.
What about the idea of, Pat, the production credit requires that you shoot at a qualified facility. Is there anything like that in the post-only credit?
No, there is not.
There's
If I want
not.
to take my laptop and go to Lake George?
You can do it.
You can do it.
Spec-
And you'll get
no,
35%,
specifically,
by the way.
we as an alliance and as the stakeholders at the time when we were lobbying specifically decided that it was in everybody's best interest to be inclusive, not exclusive. And we wanted to provide the opportunity for a very entrepreneurial frame of reference, because a lot of us come from entrepreneurial backgrounds. I started Post Factory with one Avid. I know a lot of you in this room know the story, but it was like one Avid in a little apartment in Little Italy, and that's, one step at a time. So I was a big proponent of make it possible for the small VFX company or whoever it is, like, that editor in his house, because that's only going to enrich all of us. And the way Yana's talking about upstate, we really have a strong sense of community, and we want the community to grow, because it's more about the human capital than like renting that Avid. It's about talent and human capital for me at least. Right. And I think for a lot of people in the Alliance.
Okay. Great.
And for us.
Yeah, no, I think we're all on the same page about that.
We're going to take some questions at the end, if you don't mind. Well, I'm sure, yeah, well, okay, we'll take that. Can you do, if you're doing half of your post work here and
Yes.
half there?
Yes.
You get
Does
that
the-
extra bump.
Yeah,
Does the
it's-
half up there qualify for 35?
Yes.
It's clear on the application that you indicate where you spent the money. So whatever you spent that's inside the Metropolitan Transportation, those counties I named, whatever you spend in those counties, that's qualified spend, you'll get the 30% for, and whatever you spend in counties that are not inside that Metropolitan Transportation Commuter District, you'll get the 35. And it's
That's a
all
very,
laid
very
out.
exciting piece of this credit. Anything you do upstate, any piece of it, you get the 35% on.
Okay. Pat, can you talk a little bit about the actual dollars? Like, how do I get my dollar? How do I
How do I get the check?
How do I get a check?
Well, I have my
Pat
personal
writes it.
check.
Listen, we have a suitcase in the back.
And Chase Bank, it's
It's
great.
really-
It's my own personal check, it's been great so far. No, you go through the process of the application. I have a great team. Some of you may already know them because you maybe did the other credit, Connie McFeely and Cynthia Jones, and they manage the actual application process itself. You do a phone call with, you turn in all your materials, you turn in the budget and what you anticipate you're going to spend in your initial application. Before, as we said, you have to turn that in before your actual principal photography is completed. They will go through it. There'll be a phone call to go through it with you to make sure, they'll point out to you if they think that there are some issues or some things that need to be cleared up in the initial application. Then when you have completed your production, I think you have 60 days to then turn in the final application. And at that point, of course, then you're giving real dollars, not projected spend, but the real spend. When you do look at the application, you'll see how it guides you to the question that was just asked a moment ago. It guides you so that you demonstrate what you spent downstate versus what you spent upstate, what's qualified, what's not qualified. They will evaluate it. They'll discuss with you if they challenge or question some of what you do. They'll call in receipts and things like that. When they're done, a certificate of tax credit is issued. Then that certificate of tax credit, you will, when the applicant, whomever the applicant is, when the applicant submits his or her New York State tax return, then this certificate is attached. And the credit first goes against the taxes owed by the applicant or the applicants. And whatever, so it must go against whatever you owe first, and then if the credit is greater than what you owe, then the rest of it you get back in cash. And I mean, I could talk
so
about
that-
the 3 levels, but nobody ever goes beyond
Right,
the first
right.
level.
And if I can just say one quick thing, because the company that I'm the managing director of, Trevanna Post, we're a post-production accounting company, and we submit all the tax credits. And we've worked on tax credits in every state, and so I've worked with every state that has them. We've submitted those tax credits, and I just want to say about Pat's office and about the New York State, the way that it's administrated, it's by far and away the best, the most transparent, the clearest. They're the best people. You have no idea what it's like to speak to a CPA who has no idea what film production is at all, and you spend all this time explaining to them what's going on. These guys they're the greatest, and they're very quick and they're very efficient, and I feel like the way that the New York State tax credit is structured is just very rational. It rebates workers and it rebates purchases. It's very simple. And very clear. And they're a great office to work with. Absolutely the best in the country.
I have a question, and because I keep saying this, but I just want to make sure I'm right about this information. Our tax credit pays for itself, right? Before the state pays out $1, they've already collected the money in the various revenues and payroll taxes, in other words. And I think when you guys in the film community are talking about this, because every once in a while an article will pop up in the New York Times talking about film tax credits and these entitled Hollywood people, and we're paying for it. You're paying for it. Anybody that's making a movie is funding this program, and it's important to be able to say that to your friends outside of the film business so they don't think that it's taking away from schools or some other thing. In fact, it's adding more money back into the overall coffer that goes to all those other programs.
In fact, Pat, we were talking about this back there. In fact, anyone who works in the state owes tax to the state. So, I was asked once, well, why should I give Tom Cruise my tax dollars? Well, not only are you not giving Tom Cruise your tax dollars because it's going to whoever's financing his movie, but suddenly Tom Cruise is a taxpayer in the state of New York. It's, the big actors, and the best part about New York, Pat, is...
I'm over here having a heart attack.
The best part about New York, because other states do allow above the line to qualify. New York,
We don't.
they don't even qualify.
Yeah.
So whatever money is paid to the above the line does not even go into the calculation of your incentive, and yet all of those people working above the line, the high earners, are actually, by law required to file tax returns here and
They're
apportion their
contributing.
income.
Yeah.
So it does. I think you're right. It does more than pay for itself. I just want to go back to one other thing about this about the tax credits in general, and I will say that what Pat described as the process, that is the standard process that most people go through. There are, of course, new and improved ways of doing things, and a lot of companies, including entertainment partners, now actually are in the business of financing credits in advance. What you're going to get as a tax credit, that is an asset. So there are companies who will lend against it. So you can monetize that credit. Of course, whenever you hear that terminology, that means you're going to get less. You're not going. If it's $1 million credit, you're not going to get $1 million up front, obviously. But there are a lot of ways to slice it. Now, New York is the structure has to be correct. There has to be a completion bond in place because New York requires that the film be completed to get the tax credit. New York is not a transferable state, so the legal structure has to be addressed. But it is possible to finance the full production credit as well as the post-only credit. Okay.
And that's been very exciting.
Yeah. Now, of course, the other question I have is, have we seen shows? How's it going since you bumped it from 10 to 30?
Oh, it's so exciting. In the, 2 years that the original program?
2010, yeah.
Yeah, it's 2010.
August of 2010.
August 2010. So in the 2 years that the program existed as a 10% program, in those 2 years we got 18 applications, which was nice. But in the 2 months since Governor Cuomo signed this new robust credit into law, in 2 months, we've already gotten 12 applications. And we know more are coming. And they are coming from around the country and around the world. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And, just to put the point on that, Pat and Yana and I went on after the first one was done, we went on the selling tour to all the studio people, and they were like, in LA. And, we spent a week there, and we just heard over and over again, this is not going to work until you get this, until you bump it up to this and fix these parts of it. And it was a 2-year slog through the legislature to get it to this 30%. They were not, open to this to start with. So it was a process, and big props to the governor. Big props to the governor for doing this. He's really put himself out there for us.
And I can say for in my moonlighting time, I do budgets, and I had a show that I was budgeting for a certain female director who shall go nameless, my wife, but and it shoots in Italy.
It's a very good film. Go see it.
Thank you. Yes, the last one. Thank you. But this is a new film that shoots in Italy, and was budgeted to do post in Rome, and at the time it was cheaper. Not by much, but it was still cheaper. With this new incentive, now we've switched it back, and the post is coming here. So,
Right on.
it definitely, the numbers, when you compare the numbers, they definitely work.
Yeah.
They definitely work.
And the food is just as good in New York.
All right. Don't push it now.
Italian restaurant. Terrific Italian restaurant. So you're not going to miss anything.
So have you seen shows that have come here just specifically for the postgrad? Do you think that?
Oh yeah,
it's really
right
having a
away.
big impact?
Right away. I mean, Yana identified like 3 companies within the first 3 days that she had reached out to, who said immediately they were gonna turn the ship in the ocean and bring their production here, and now we're up to 12. So yes, absolutely.
So our challenge is getting the word out about it, that it exists. That's our first challenge, and it's been so exciting working with the governor's office, and they're like very encouraging us to make lots of announcements. And I've had to explain to them, like, we're in post-production, and the reason why we're in post-production is because we're loners and we like to be alone, and we don't know anything about marketing, and this is very far outside of our wheelhouse. So it's been very exciting for all of us to have to reach out and reach into the world and talk to the press and talk to you and talk to each other. And so hopefully the word is now getting out that it exists.
And Pat, just to clarify, the relationship to the production credit, how does it, if I'm here doing, and I'm taking the production credit, my post is going to qualify?
Yeah,
at 30%.
And that's such an important point, because there has been a little bit of confusion among some people who perhaps has not yet taken advantage of the bigger credit that started in '04, the film production credit, we refer to it. With that original program, if you must film your production in New York, and you must do stage work in New York, and once you cross those thresholds, then you're going to get 30% on all your qualified costs. If you cross those thresholds and you're in the film production credit program, if you do your post here, and if you do 75% of your post here, you get that credit for your post. So it's not that you don't get it for post production. If you're in the production credit program, you do get it for post production.
Mm-hmm.
It was always 30%. It was always 30% if you did production and post here.
But the big exciting thing is, as Yana has said, the big exciting thing is now, if you shoot somewhere else,
shoot anywhere,
you could come in and get the post-production credits. Okay. So it's really terrific. We get them both ways.
And who are we competing with? Where do you think, who's New York competing with in this?
Well, there's no other there's no other standalone post credit.
Right.
But in terms of where studios budget to do post because of incentives, I would say probably Los Angeles, obviously. They don't need an incentive. They just have a lot of the infrastructure there. A lot of stuff goes back there. Canada.
Georgia.
Not Georgia that much, though. But
the guys from Sony chase Georgia credits. It depends. I mean, the big boys, they chase the credits.
Certainly they chase the Georgia production credit.
But your question was more to like who is
where's this work going to come from?
The only other place that that has a comparable post infrastructure to the one that we have in New York is LA. That's it.
Well, do you anticipate that we're going to draw from Toronto and Vancouver?
Oh, for sure.
And London?
But I would argue that we already have a better post infrastructure than Canada. That's my premise, is just that we're already better than them. But they are our competition.
It's absolutely true. But, I mean, we all know. It's like, where do you want to be in the world? Well, people want to come to New York. So the best editors, the best colorists, the best mixers, they want to be here. They're in LA for a different reason. People don't really want to go to Vancouver to do post-production.
Right. So here's another just detail about about the production and the post incentive. And what's great about it, but what's also tough, is that travel and living is not rebatable. You don't get 30% or 35% on the hotels you stay in, on the apartments you rent. If you relocate to here, your flights, that's not rebatable. And I think that that's a very rational part of it. I think it makes a lot of sense, but it's also tough because that's expensive, right? If you're not from here and you're making the commitment to relocate here, that money, you are not getting any piece of that back. So that's really why, one of the primary reasons why we had to increase it, because at 10% it was a wash. You were just paying to live here.
So if I'm bringing my editor in from LA, housing per diem,
nope,
that doesn't qualify.
But his salary will count.
Does.
Okay. All right. What about other things that you made me think of? Obviously, actors of talent looping not going to qualify.
As you've already touched on, we do not do above the line.
But the looping facility will qualify.
Yeah, the facility will qualify. The editor or the technician, the specialist.
The mixed stage.
That will qualify.
Visual effects.
And
it absolutely will qualify.
Like Pat said, their website is the Form B on the New York Lebs Film website is the greatest thing ever. It's an Excel document. You can just Control F, and any question you have, you throw it in there, and it'll tell you what qualifies and what doesn't. It's a great document.
It is great, isn't it? Thank you. We're very proud of it. One thing to be very careful when you just word of caution. Just make sure you go to the right incentive Form B. So when you go to our website, there's you go to one button and you'll get all the documents that you need for the production credit, and there's a Form B for the production credit. But if you go to another button, you go to all the documents you need for the post-production, the standalone, freestanding post-production, which is what we're talking about, post-production credit, and there's a Form B there. They're different. There are some differences. So just double check and make sure you're looking at whichever Form B you mean to be looking at, depending on which program you're thinking about utilizing.
So because I'm a payroll guy, labor, all the costs associated with labor, fringes, pension, health, welfare, payroll taxes, all qualifies
Absolutely.
in New York.
Because this is about jobs, and we want people in New York to work. Governor Cuomo wants people in
As
New York
long as the
to be
service is
working.
performed in New York.
Yes. And you can get everybody want and need here, which is
That's true.
why we've never felt badly about not doing hotels. Yeah. Who needs a hotel? You hire Alex.
Exactly.
I can do it all.
That is an excellent incentive to hire local.
To hire Alex. It's an excellent
To hire
incentive
Alex.
to hire Alex.
Yeah.
Not anybody else, just me.
Let's take a couple of questions. Yes, sir.
Do any nonfiction television productions count, like with Deadliest Catch count? Because it's certainly written in post.
Doesn't that count?
No.
No.
No, the same types of shows qualify, and those are narrative, right, features. Yes.
So why don't documentaries count?
I mean, I'll let Pat like follow up to this answer. That this is my understanding of it. It's just when the credit was formed in 2004, the stakeholders who made that credit were like SAG and the guilds and the unions, and so these are the people who were invested in structuring it, and so that's why it's fiction. But the other thing, and this is important, is that it's a limited allocation of money, and you have to do something to limit the bleed on the money. And so I think that the way that New York did it, it makes a lot of sense. This is totally like an aside. Does it make as much sense for the post only credit? And that's something we're discussing as an alliance.
And part of the point of it is to foster growth and encourage things. When you think about like what could New York really use? Well, we could use a more robust visual effects industry. So if this does something that lets the stakeholders be able to reinvest their dollars back into that kind of stuff, and you got to pick your battles. Where are we going to get more jobs? And I'm a nonfiction filmmaker. I made a documentary film that was on HBO, so I'm very empathetic to the idea of like, yeah, I wish my nonfiction projects would qualify, but we have to pick and choose somewhere.
And to get back, I mean, I at the time in '04 when the original thing was being designed and developed, it was there were many strategic decisions being made. And it gets down to what you were saying, Alex, which is that everything couldn't be covered, and it was to look very strategically at what was going to create the most jobs and what was going to create the most reinvestment. I mean, because, hey, the unions and guilds do nonfiction as well. So they weren't sitting there being selfish and thinking, we only do narrative. No, it was a very strategic decision about what will we lose. At that time, what we felt we were losing was the narrative stuff going to Toronto, doing stage work in Toronto, and then going out in the streets of Toronto because it looked just enough like New York to cheat New York, and then come down here for 2 days.
Right.
So the idea was make them come here, make them do their stage work here so that they would then go out and do all the location work here, and bingo, we've got them moving. It was a strategic decision.
Yeah, you're incentivizing them, or disincentivizing them to be somewhere else. And also, I might add, 8 years ago, reality television was not the driver that it is now. Reality television has grown tremendously, and to its credit, it may not need those kind of incentives. Reality television has its own different business model that is generating tons of jobs and points of entry.
Yeah. Back there?
I have two questions. One is going back, Richard, to what you said about New York being a non-transferable state and the impact that has on if you're financing those credits.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question is for you guys. What was I'm sure you guys did some projections on what you thought the growth would be in terms of what would grow in terms of the post-production work in New York. Can you share some of those estimates?
Can I answer the last question first, and then your first question will turn over to you? We did do an estimation, so we looked at a average feature that we worked on in my office, and again, I'm an accounting office, so I have a lot of these numbers. So a $27 million feature, to complete the post-production on that requires about 400 jobs. And we estimated we had about 40 post-production jobs in New York, and we project that will double with this post incentive. So in terms of how many jobs
So is that 40 times 400?
Yeah.
So
Pretty much.
16,000 jobs.
Yeah.
So we're estimating a double.
But you have to kind of bring that down a little bit because, you know, some people can do like 2 jobs a year.
They go from one
stuff
job
like
to
that. Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
But things like
literally
editorial-
thousands of jobs.
But on the other hand, unlike production, which can be very fast, the editor is going to be on for a much longer period of time. So
Well, that's the other thing about the nature of post-production
Yeah.
jobs is that they aren't like, you know, 26 weeks and then you're on unemployment. These tend to be longer jobs.
And that was something that the people in the political scene just didn't get. They did not understand, like, oh, there's actually like businesses that are in business year round and people do this continuously.
Well, that's been an exciting part
Yeah.
about lobbying, just as an aside. It's been really fun to have like legislators come into our facilities and like tour, you know, watch what a color corrector does and watch, like, do some ADR at a sound, you know, looping studio. That's actually been really, really fun
Shelley
to have
did-
them down from Albany.
Shelley did some ADR for you.
No, Senator Smith. He was awesome.
Malcolm?
So, and then, so in terms of financing, I mean, obviously, on a very basic level, if you have this asset, and I'm going to lend against it, well, how am I going to collect? So if it's a transferable state, then it's easier because you can transfer it to anyone. You can transfer it to me. This is not a transferable state, so now it's a matter of this becomes collateral. So the structure, the structure that your company works under starts to get important, because if you have any other, you heard Pat say, if you have any other state tax liability, the state's going to take that money out, and I could come up short. So if you just as an individual wanted to do this, no, I'm probably not going to do that. It's going to have to be a clean C Corp that that I know doesn't have a prior liability.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to say, I understand that animation isn't qualifying for this credit.
Is it true?
Just live action elements? Is there any idea to get animated?
But if animation is part of effects, would that qualify? As a visual effects animation?
If it's within,
If it's within a production,
yeah, if animation is happening within a production that has live action, then
so you're,
absolutely.
so you're doing Roger Rabbit qualifies. You're doing Ice Age doesn't qualify.
And is there any movement or any structure to get it to qualify?
Well, I think as that industry grows, as part of the visual effects industry growing, that's something that could certainly be brought onto the table. But, you know, the stakeholders right now, the animation business is not a big business in that way, right? In these states. I mean, Blue Sky, no, it's not who cares, but it's like somebody's got to get in there, join the alliance and say, hey, I'm an animation company. Let's make this part of the, you know, and if you're in an animation company, come join us. We're looking for members. Like, we're absolutely ready to like go to bat for anybody that wants to sort of put in the sweat equity to help, you know, enlarge that alliance. Is that true?
Anyone who likes trips to Albany, they're
Anybody
really
wants to-
fun.
yeah.
Man, Albany.
Come meet the legislators and say we need animators to do it.
Prettiest train rides ever.
Yeah.
It is.
Beautiful.
That's the truth.
Back there, and then we'll come around.
If your production scheduled later in the year, the post is going to bleed from one year to the next, how does that affect the credit?
That's okay, because you have to apply, as we said, you have to apply while you're still filming, principal. You send in your initial application, but when you get the credit is based on when you turn in the final application. So it's okay if it bleeds into next year. It's all going to happen when you finish.
I have a question about that. What if I'm shooting in Louisiana, but my editor is in New York and stays in New York, and so does that qualify? The editor during photography, if they're working here, as long as in New York.
As long as you do 75,
My editor's staying home from now
as
on.
long as you, don't forget. as
My
long as
editor's
you
not
do-
coming to Italy.
You have to do 75% of your qualified post work
Right.
in New York.
Assuming that the whole show is going to post here, my editor but it doesn't have to be work. It's post-production work, not the work done in the post-production period, I guess is what I'm.
That's right, yes.
That's right.
It's
And
the
then
post-production
The
work.
day he's done reviewing dailies, he starts to qualify.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And all of that is spelled out in the Form B.
Okay.
And in
Good.
the instructions
Well,
that go with it.
I'm coming around this way, so does somebody here have a question? Yes.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late, but is there a budget limitation below or above
For post only?
for the production?
No, it's just as long as you meet the 75% threshold of your spend.
I meant,
You mean if you're doing $1 million movie?
you have ultra low budget budget, you have low budget, you have.
No.
No.
All budgets, we take all comers.
No
budget.
minimums, no maximums.
Right.
Yeah.
Or caps, I should say, not
Right.
maximums.
Right.
No ceilings, no
I
floors.
just have a question on what you just said. You said once they finish looking at dailies, that's when they start to qualify? Does
Well,
that mean
it was
that if
just-
you start on the first day of principal photography in editorial in New York, is
Yeah.
that piece covered?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
It was just a fun conversation that Pat's office and my office had when we were trying to figure out what is going to be post, and we had these very esoteric, like, well, what is post? Well, reviewing dailies, that's not really post, but the next day, you know, anything you're doing that's not reviewing dailies.
Well, if you're talking to some editors, they would say
It's-
that's part
I mean,
of post.
it's-
And I would say that's part of post.
I know.
I'm on your side. You're
Trust
wrong.
me, we had some serious throwdowns
And there are
about
some
this.
differences between how we define it for the production credit versus the post-production
Well,
credit.
and if you're dealing with visual effects, there's definitely
Yeah,
some differences in
definitely.
terms of where that visual effects line is. There are some devil in the details that you got to dig into when you
Right,
get
I mean,
to
if
it.
you have a visual effects person in New York, but the services have to be performed
It has to be performed here.
Got it, okay.
Always, always,
So if they
always.
go on a location, but if they're doing work here.
Well, but if you have a visual effects supervisor on location supervising the effects in
Right.
Louisiana, that does not
does not
count as
qualify.
post.
Right.
But they come back to New York and your visual effects guy is doing wire removal, or your visual effects producer is here in New York in post factory supervising all the visual effects people, that begins to qualify.
Important that he's in post-factory.
Well, wherever he is. You can be in technical.
Right, no,
or-
absolutely,
yeah.
right. But the point is
But
where
why would you want
he's
to be
working.
anywhere other than post factory?
I'm with you.
sorry.
But one thing,
alrighty.
and to pick up on the very nice things you said about my team, the Cynthia and Connie that just work like dogs. They're just great. And what they would prefer that you call them and ask questions. I mean, they are there to, I mean, that's what we're known for, right?
Absolutely.
They will take you by the hand and they will walk you through it and they will answer all your questions and make sure you understand
You
where
can
these
also
lines
always
are
call my
drawn.
office,
I-
so we do this all day long.
Right, I think that's like the overriding message that we all kind of try and get out there into the world. It's like, ask sooner, because if we save you money by answering a question sooner, that's more money that's, again, going to go back into your show or
Right.
your movie.
Yeah, I think you said it before, post starts in pre-production.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, does the form of distribution matter? Could it be made for Netflix, YouTube, a web episode? Doesn't matter?
No, you just have to finish it,
Well,
and it
but
has to be distributed somewhere.
But it has to be, we have defined what a feature-length film is, and we have defined, I mean, we actually have how long the film is. In other words, we don't do short films, for
Well, I'm
example.
talking more about episodic television.
Right, right. So but just so you know,
The
we've
platform.
defined that, you know, it has to be a certain number of minutes to be, the minimum number of minutes to be episodic television, the minimum number of minutes to be a feature film. So you do have to meet those.
But the question is it platform agnostic? Does the
Agnostic.
delivery platform
Yeah.
matter? So it's platform agnostic.
Yeah.
Deliver through the web, deliver through the theater, deliver through Netflix, can still qualify.
You can't do 13 times 30 scripted half hours?
Sure you can.
No, you can't. But you can't do 13 times 10 minutes times.
No, he said 13 by times 30.
Yeah.
That would be okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, you've defined the length of an episode in the, I
Yeah,
mean.
yes, that is defined, but you
Okay.
said 30 would be, I think we actually say
22, right?
22,
Yeah.
probably.
30 is 22.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Probably
right,
22.
right.
Right.
Alexis,
So
you have a
it's
question?
with commercial breaks.
I was just curious about the admin. Post incentive, production incentive, are you finding with these 12 people who have taken advantage of the recent post incentive that the same person on the production is handling the application and the backup information? What is the onus on production now to provide you with all that? Who's doing that?
So where's the handoff? Where's the handoff from the UPM to post accounting?
Is it UPM or is it accounting or?
Yeah, who's doing it?
actually
Like,
handling-
Trevanna, you'll do.
You're doing it on the post side, right? People hire you guys for that.
Right.
Yeah, it's the accountants.
I mean, the accountants
are doing all
have
this.
to,
The
yeah.
production
Yeah.
accountants,
Yeah.
and the production, typically your production accountant is gonna submit your original application,
Right.
and your post accountant is gonna submit your final application.
So they're handled separately so far, in terms of.
They always
within the
have
production?
been.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
always
they
have.
always have been.
Okay.
But
And then the post
Trevanna
only
does,
incentive.
Trevanna, I mean, you don't just only do post-production, right? You'll do.
We tend to mostly do post-production, yeah. It's a very different model. Production accounting is a totally different business model. I mean, we've done a few shows, but mostly, yeah, we just do post-production.
Yeah.
So you
But
find
the
those
post-
people are farming it out
to have someone else handle all that? Or
I would only be aware of the things that were farmed out to me. If people are doing it on their own, I don't
So
know
you
about
think,
that.
are you gonna do it yourself,
think
because you're
top
the Indian
would-
producer, and like, is
I'm
that?
thinking about rerolling my signal. But I was just
I would-
curious if, I didn't want to use the word burden because it's a bonus.
Right.
Right? But I'm just wondering how it impacts the day-to-day of production and if
Well, it's gonna.
extra work for the accountant or our productions
Well,
tending to hire someone.
We have, the payroll companies have accounting systems, so yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to track this spend from day one if you're, if you wanna qualify. So if you do have somebody who's working post-production, but it's during photography, then that onus is gonna, and we learned that the application has to be in, by the last day of photography.
Right.
So this is gonna be on the production, and obviously, this credit will be part of the financing arrangement in one way or another, because if you're getting a bond, it's going to be part of that production budget. So there's definitely, the producer's going to have to monitor it, the production accountant's going to have to be on it. Maybe you hire Trevanna a little early.
Rich, you've worked on big films and
Right.
your own small indie films that you
Yes.
produce, so I think as the needle moves closer towards
Absolutely.
indie, would it be fair to say, like,
You're doing
the
everything.
person who's doing everything is
Doing
just doing one more thing?
Right.
And if you're on the bigger movie, the person you're hiring to do that part is doing one more thing.
But as you said,
It's been a part of the accountant's job for
Yeah.
so long now, because every film, I mean, I don't remember the last time I worked on a movie that wasn't a tax credit movie,
Yeah.
at least in one state. Many times it's multiple states that you're doing
Yep.
the tax incentives for, and it's just part of our job. And I don't want to like disparage these companies who have made it seem like these applications are very, very, very difficult to do and charge you like a ton of money to do them, and don't act like it's the accountant's job. But at least the New York State credit, I'm not saying it's easy to do, but an independent producer can complete that application. I would suggest you have an accountant help you, in the end. But
you can do your own
that's the
taxes
accountant's
or-
job,
yeah.
It's the accountant's job.
Production accountants, the New York production accountants are very adept, and they know how to do it, and they do a terrific job. So New York production accountants fill these things out all the time. And by the way, if you're looking for a job opportunity in this industry, I honestly believe the fastest growing job opportunity in this
Yes.
industry is to learn to be a production accountant.
Yeah.
And in
We-
fact,
we
that's
can't
your
staff
opening
shows.
to pitch
We
something
can't-
you're about to do.
we cannot staff shows
Well,
fast
aren't you
enough.
guys about to
Or an
do
added
training
tech.
at EP? Aren't you about?
Well, we do offer some training. We don't have any kind of a program where we're
I
not
thought
certifying.
you were-
any-
I thought you were
No.
creating
Then the overage has become our fault.
But anyway, you know a bright young
but it is
person who's
it's a
good
very
with numbers.
fast-growing.
Go into this.
I'm just going to move to back there.
I
Yeah.
have two quick questions. The
Go.
first, are there qualified facilities, like qualified stages? And the second question is there a yearly budget threshold that once the state has committed it, that's it, no matter who else applies?
So the
Yes,
first question
the
is,
first que-
anybody can qualify, even if you haven't have it in your garage. It's unlike the production thing, it's inclusive and entrepreneurial.
As the garage is.
As long as the garage is in New York State.
And the post allocation is $7 million a year for 5 years. For the post-only credit, it's a carve-out of the entire production credit is $420 million a year. We have it for 5 years, and the sub-allocation is for post-only, and that's a $7 million carve-out.
Is there some place that we can check and see how much of that's spoken for the year? Is it just not that exactly the science will look?
Well, because you don't really know exactly until, we kind of keep our own little rough internal, for our eyes only tracking of how we're doing. But that's based on, most of it's based on the initial application. And you don't know for sure where you are. We don't know for sure where we are until we get the final applications. But we keep a.
We're in good shape, though. We're in good shape.
Got time for two more questions. There's one.
Follow up to the question about distribution. Had I worked with folks in your office a while ago, were things that may have had a portion on TV and web for distribution. So the post-production credit doesn't matter for distribution. It's on length of show, if I heard you correctly.
That's true for both of them.
That's changed then.
No?
No?
Not unless I misunderstand your question.
Um,
It's always been about length of show.
Airing or feature distribution, and I may have misunderstood your office a couple years ago when we were dealing.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, with the big credit, and even with this credit, you don't even have to have distribution in place. You just have to finish the project.
Okay,
You have
So I
to
think
create
we-
the answer print.
Last question.
I'm sorry, to continue this, you did say it needs to be distributed somewhere. You did say that.
No,
There
well,
still needs to be a
I
certain
don't know
amount.
that. It doesn't have to, we hope it'll be distributed, we wish it the best of luck.
No,
But you
it just has to be
It's
completed.
just,
It
it's just
just has
to be
to be
finished.
completed.
There's no penalty because like somebody didn't pick you up.
Right.
Whereas there are some states and
Where it
places
does,
where you
right.
have to walk in the door and have a distribution deal in your hand. We are
Right.
not like that.
It's designed again to encourage independent filmmaking and you know, economic activity.
So I want to thank Women in Film for hosting this, and I want to thank our panelists, Yana, Alex, and Pat. Thank you.